into the fray. It's Vanity Azul from Team SoulBlaze doing another Yu-Gi-Oh deck profile. It has been a while since we've done one of these. I believe the last time we did this was 8 months ago, I want to say. Maybe slightly less than that, or definitely not more than 10, but it's been a while, point being. And this time we're going to review some decks so that we can get back into the groove of things. This time is Predaplant. So if you remember, like a few weeks ago, there was a Predaplant versus Phantom Knights deck. I don't know why I forgot the name Phantom Knights. And it worked out pretty well. Honestly, when we were doing that video, I genuinely thought Predaplant was going to sweep through Phantom Knights, considering the person who was using it tends to do, I quote and hate quotes, random bullshit whenever they play Phantom Knights. And when I say that, I mean they just click every random button physically possible whenever it pops up. So, yeah. But apparently it was actually a pretty good game, and now we're doing Predaplants from that. So let's go ahead and get this started. First up, we have 30 monsters, 18 spells, and 12 traps. That's normally the standard lineup I like to build my decks with. I don't like using less than 60 cards because it feels weird having empty space. And yeah, so let's go ahead and go. First up, we've got 3 copies of Predaplant Spinodina E. I don't know why, I just forgot that thing's name. 1800 attack, 0 defense, looks like a dinosaur, but all of these are plants, except for some of the extra deck cards which are dragons. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, place 1 Pretta counter on it, and if it is level 2 or higher, it becomes level 1 as long as it has a Pretta counter on it. And Predator, I don't know why I can't do this today. After damage calculation, if this card battled an opponent's monster with equal or lower level, you can special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck, except for this card, to the field. So that's always really helpful. It's an 1800 attacker, which is a pretty good number for me. I don't like things that are lower than 1600 for like level 4 monsters, so 1800 feels like a nice number to me. It can put Predator counters on a card, which is this deck's main gimmick, where you bring their levels down to 1 and then you activate abilities if their level is lower than yours or if their level is 1. And it doesn't have to destroy a monster to get the special summon off as long as it, battled something. So say, for example, you battled against Big Shield Gardener at level 4, and you placed a counter on it, and it attacked it, and you can get a special summon out of it because Gardener is normally level 4, so you don't even have to place a counter on it anyways, but it would become level 1 once the counter's on it, and even though Gardener wasn't destroyed, because presumably it's in defense mode, you can call down a monster still. So, still very helpful to have. It can enable certain combos in this deck, and it can help create field presence, so I say 3 copies. Next up, we have 3 copies of Predaplant Moray Neptus. 1600 attack, 1000 defense, level 4 as well. All of these are dark plants, I believe, so that's going to be that's something I'm not going to repeat during this. This card gains 200 attack for each Predator counter on the field, includes yours and your opponent. And when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can equip that monster to this card. Once per turn, you can target 1 monster card equipped to this card by this card's effect, destroy it if you do gain life points equal to that card's original attack. So that's good. It's not one of the cards where you can just constantly gain power for each card equipped to it, but I feel like they'll get too powerful because it gets 200 attack already for each Predator counter on the field, and then it could get more power from stuff being equipped to it, but thankfully it doesn't do that, and you can just destroy it to gain life. Very helpful, very, I guess, survival card-ish, so I say pretty decent. 3 copies. 3 copies of Predaplant, Orphis, Scorpio, the 1200 attack, AK 800 defense. I don't know why I can't talk today. Dark attribute, plant. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard. Special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck, except for this card, you may only use this effect once per turn. So that's helpful. You could attack with this thing against a level 4 or lower, use its ability, bring this card out, use this thing ability, discard a monster, get out another Predaplant monster, and just from 1 card battling, you got out 2 more monsters on the board. Yeah. This card's really good. 3 copies, yet for some reason I never drawn to it. 3 copies of literally my favorite card to abuse in this entire deck, despite the fact that it's once per duel, which I say is bullshit, but I also understand why it's like that, because if it wasn't, I promise you, this deck would probably be tier 0, and it would be beating the shit out of everything, considering how much I would try to spam this. Considering every time I do try to spam this, it stops me because it's a once per duel. Predaplant, Darlington Tona Cobra. One of the worst names out of these in my opinion, but still the best effect out of all of these in my opinion, so we're on even footing here. Level 3, 1000 attack and 1500 defense. If this card is special summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, this thing, maybe something else that we get to when we get later into the deck, you can add 1 Polymerization spell card or 1 Fusion spell card from the deck to the hand. You may only use this effect once per duel. Yeah, if it wasn't once per duel, you could just, you know, protect this thing with your life, use its skill to bring out this thing, use this thing's skill to bring out this thing, use its skill to search for polymerization, or a quick play spell that acts like polymerization, use that quick play spell, get out a giant-ass fusion monster of any one of these cards, and then just ram your opponent down until they die and probably end it on the first turn. Yeah, I can see why this thing's at once per duel. So, but it's still helpful because it can get the fusion cards. 3 copies because I just, you know, don't want it to be sent to graveyard if your opponent's playing a very certain mill deck. If you think milling isn't as good as it is in like anime where you're allowed to use anime cards, it still does good in real life. Just if you put anime rules on, you see a very certain card come out a lot when they're using mill decks, and I'm just going to say that card is very annoying to deal with. Next up, we've got 3 copies of Predaplant Penthis. 300 attack, 2100 defense, level 3 dark attribute, as usual with the plant. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, yeah, because that's going to happen with 300 attack. I think you're just supposed to set this face down and then just let them ram into it. You can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, place 1 Predator counter on it, and if it's level 2 or higher, it becomes level 1 as long as it has the counter. And then once per turn, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls level less than or equal to this card's, and take control of it till the end phase. So you're telling me if my opponent just happens to have, I don't know, I'm pretty sure this wouldn't even touch them anyways, but an Obelisk the Tormentor on the board, and I gave it a Predator counter, and I could just take it because now it's level 1 instead of being level 10, and I can just ram into them with a fucking 4K beat stick. Yeah, cool. That's very helpful to have. I guess just 3 copies because it can take anything that your opponent has and take it to your advantage, and then you can use it for fusion fodder, you can use it for link fodder, which could then become fusion fodder, or, you know, you can just use it to beat the shit out of your opponent, or just to take something that you don't want them having for the turn, because maybe it's just a wall that you can't get past, so now they don't have a wall. Next up, we've got 3 copies of Predaplant Squid Dorsia. 8k base, 800 attack, 400 defense, level 2. I don't know why I keep saying 8k base. You can send this card from hand to graveyard, then target one face-up monster you control. This turn, it can attack all monsters your opponent controls with Predator counters on it once each. And at this face-up card leaves the field, place 1 Predator counter on each special summon monster your opponent controls. And it's the same as they always do, where the level become 1 if they're higher, if the level is 2 or higher. So that's really good. It can just make anything you want hit everything. Straight up. Field nuke to a tentacle default, and I really like that. I don't remember the Predaplant versus Phantom Knights game much, but I believe in one of our test matches this thing came in handy where there were like 4 monsters on board, and I believe it was this card or this one that was just starting to nuke the board because of this. So, you know, this card's really helpful, and it can just give Predator counters on literally everything on board that was special summon. And we're in like the stages of Yu-Gi-Oh where they just started adding as many special summon mechanics as possible, so this thing can be abused to so many extents. So 3 copies. 3 copies of Predaplant Clama do Sudu. God, why do these cards have such weird names? 6k, 600 attack, 200 defense, level 2. Monsters with Predator counters that you use as fusion materials are treated as dark. So during your main phase, you can fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using this card on the field, and monsters from your hand, field, or monsters with Predator counters your opponent controls as fusion materials. You can only use this effect once per turn. This is amazing. Straight up, between this, and this, these 3 are my favorite cards. If any of these are in my hand, you can expect me to go all out rush. You're dead. I'm going to bring out a fusion monster on my first turn, because this one just lets me get an extra attack / search into this boy who searches fusion cards. This one just lets me, you know, get fusions for free if I take monsters with itself and Predaplant monsters on my field, or monsters in my hand or field that don't have to be Predaplants, or things that have Predator counters on them, which also count as dark, which most of these monsters need dark monsters anyways to use, so great. So no matter what, if one of these 3s are in my hand, I'm gonna fusion summon the same turn, because that's just how it is. Always, this at 3, this at 3, this at 3, perfect. If you want to take everything else out of this deck, you can be glad to, but these 3 gotta stay at 3 no matter what. Next up, we have 3 copies of Predaplant Flytrap. Level 2, 400 attack, 800 defense. Once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, place 1 Predator counter on it, and if it is level 2 or higher, it becomes level 1 as always. And at the start of the damage step, when it battles a monster with equal or lower level to it, you can destroy that monster, then increase this card level by the original level of the destroyed monster. So instead of it getting attack, it gets level. That's good. And you can just blow up a monster that has a lower level or equal level to it. So just place a Predator counter on it, and it's fucked. Anything that bothers you, blow it up in one random hit. I can't think of anything in particular off the moment. I guess like a Phantom Knights card that isn't necessarily a siege monster. That's like, say, level 4, you place a counter on it, this thing attacks into it, that thing blows up, and then this thing's level becomes 6, I believe. So, you know, it just constantly gets stronger, and they can't really kill it, so helpful card to have, just needing if you need to get rid of annoying cards. 3 copies. 3 copies of Predaplant, Seren, Sen, Eant. I do not understand what I just said between that, and I don't care anymore. Level 1, 100 attack and 600 defense. When an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand. After damage calculation, if this card battled an opponent's monster, you can destroy the monster. You can destroy that opponent's monster, and if this card is destroyed by battle, or if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add one Predap card from your deck to your hand, except Predaplant Seracret. So you can only use this effect once per turn. So let me get this straight. If this thing battles an opponent's monster, probably gonna lose, that monster dies immediately regardless of what happens, whether it won or lost. But then, if it dies by battle, or if it's sent to the field if it's sent to the graveyard from the field by a card effect, you can literally search out anything in this deck that has remotely to do with Predaplant, because everything in this deck has the Predap thing. Has a Predap in its card name if it remotely involves Predaplants. Here, this card has it. This card has it. All of these cards have it. This has it. This doesn't have it because polymerization. This has it. This has it. This has it. Yeah, see, it's right there, Pretta. This has it. This has it. This has it. So literally everything is searchable basically, except for 6 cards. Actually 9, but my point still stands. Amazing card, Hopeful Searcher, 3 copies, because the only thing it can't search for is itself. 3 copies of Predaplant, Cordyceps, our last monster. Level 1, 0 attack and 0 defense. Okay, this thing actually better have a good ability. During your standby phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 2 level 4 lower Predaplant monsters in your graveyard. Special summon them. Also, for the rest of the turn, you cannot special summon monsters except for fusion monsters, nor normal summon or set any monsters. So that's okay. You know, you are losing out on basically everything that isn't a fusion. But, you know, the good news is this deck can easily get out polymerizations a lot. In the sideboard, there are literally 6 other polymerizations followed by a card that can get polymerization back from the graveyard, so fair enough. And you know, it can involve you special summoning into this thing that can search polymerization, or maybe this thing that can just literally fusion summon with the card that you special summon with the other card's effect. So yeah, this thing kind of helps set up for stuff. Make sure you have a graveyard before you do it though. So 3 copies. Next up, we've got onto spells finally. 3 copies of Pretta Practice. Special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your hand, then add 1 Predap card from your deck to your hand, except for this card. Also, for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except for fusion monsters. So once more, you're locked out of this card, but that's fine because you still got access to literally a majority of your extra deck anyways. Once more, you can't use this one because it has to be summoned by a monster, but you can still summon this thing and still get more fusions effect off, and then you can also just get a free search out from your deck if you need to. So still a helpful card. It can help set up so 3 copies because it's absolutely free. Polymerization. Everyone knows what this does. This has been around since the start of Yugioh. If you really need me to explain it, here you go. Fusion summon 1 monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. That's all you're getting. So, you know, standard fusion card, nothing important about it. 3 copies. If you're wondering why we're using polymerization in particular, it's because, like, I don't know what it was. It might have just been the game being weird, but, like, whenever we would use this thing, or it was another fusion card searcher, it would only let us search polymerization for some reason and not cards like fusion substitute, which are counted as polymerization. It was weird, so we just been running polymerization instead just in case something happened. But if you want to put fusion substitute in this, I would suggest that because it does the same thing but better. But still polymerization if you want to avoid the weird game glitch that we ran into at some point. Next up, onto our other fusion card. 3 copies of Predaprime Fusion. If a Predaplant monster is on your field, fusion summon 1 dark monster, fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from either field as material, including 2 or more dark monsters you control. So let me get this straight. It just says either card on the field. It is a quick play spell. This is pretty much super polymerization, but without the discard. And the only downside to this is you need at least one Predaplant on your board and another Dark Monster, and then your opponent has to have at least one monster if you want to take theirs. But that's still good, because you're taking 3 monsters out, and one of them is going to be your opponent's. So that's always helpful to have. And yes, you may be wondering, this deck has 6 polarizations or 6 fusion cards? Yep. Or technically 9 if you count this thing. Yep, because normally we do not summon a lot of these. In fact, I think the most we ever did summon was in that Dark Phantom Knights versus Predaplant video. I think that was the only time we ever summoned as many fusion monsters as we did. We have never summoned any more than that. So, you know, standard fusion card that can be searched easily by almost everything, and this thing that can just, you know, take your opponent's monsters with them. So 3 copies. 3 copies of Predaplant. Reveal any number of Pretta cards in your hand, then target the same number of face-up monsters your opponent controls. Place 1 Predator counter on each one, and if you do, any of those monsters become level 1 as long as their level was 1 or 2 or higher. And if a Predaplant monster would be destroyed by battle, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. So, you know, you can set counters on anything on the board, making them usable for this card's fusion material, or making them targets for any other card that involves Predaplant or Predator counters such as this card, or maybe help out for cards such as this and this. And, you know, it can also be battle protection for Predaplant monsters. So that's just a really good thing to have. 3 copies. My only problem with like all these cards focusing on Predaplants though is I built this similar to the way the anime wanted it, where the deck was mainly focused on starving Venom, despite the fact being a Predaplant main deck card. So this doesn't really help out very much because I don't summon the Predaplant fusions very much. I only summon starving Venom, and sometimes I'll summon a Predaplant. But yeah, I mean, it's still helpful for the chances I do, it just doesn't happen often. Next up, we've got Predaplant. Once per turn, you can special summon 1 level 4 lower Predaplant monster from your hand or graveyard, but negate its effects, even if this card leaves the field, and once per turn, during your standby phase, pay 800 life points or destroy this card with continuous spell. So that's really good. You just get to bring out a level 4 lower Predaplant monster from your graveyard or hand for free, but the unfortunate side is that its effects are nullified, so you can't just like abuse this, or this, or this, or something else you want to use. But the good news is you're still getting out a wall if you need it, and you're getting back materials from your graveyard. Say you actually need to use those for link summoning, or say you still have this in your hand and you just need another fusion target. Well, there you go. So this is actually a helpful card to have, so 3 copies. And 3 copies of our last spell, Pretta Pruning. Activate this card by targeting 1 Predaplant monster in your graveyard, special summon and equip it with this card. When it leaves the field, destroy that monster. So, yep, just if this thing blows up, the monster dies. But good news is you get a free monster back from your graveyard. Its abilities aren't nullified, so take this, 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 this. I don't know why I keep saying take this. You can't use its effect, but take this, and then you can use its effect to get this out, and then use its effect to get fusions. My point still stands. This card's annoying. But yeah, you get a free revival, or you can get any of these. Like, I keep forgetting to mention, there are extra deck monsters here with Predaplant in their card name. So this thing just helps out, get you for free, and when you can't use it, you can use this. So 3 copies. And now into traps. 3 copies of Jar of Greed. Draw a card. My friend hates me for running this. It's not because Jar of Greed is just a free draw one. He hates it because in Duel Links I abuse Odeon with a I forgot what his skill is called, but it's where every time you activate a trap, your opponent takes 200 points of damage. And whew, I remember this. When he just drew for his turn, all of my trap cards wanted to go off at the same time, and I let all of them go off. One of them was a Jar of Greed, one of them was a Coffin Seller, and one of them was Embodiment of Apopus. I never really used the other 2 that often, so he never really cared for those, but he hated it because I always spammed Jar of Greed, and it would always be the one that would do him 200 points of damage. It would always be the one that he would see me shove in a deck because I can't put Pot of Greed in a deck. So, yeah. Very fun times and very hateful card for him. If he knows Jar of Greed is one of my face downs, he will blow up the Jar of Greed. Even if he knows like the other face down is probably something more deadly, he will focus on the Jar of Greed just because he hates it. Next up, we have 3 copies of Predaplanting. Trap card, normal trap. Send 1 Predaplant monster from your deck to the graveyard. Place 1 Predator counter on each face-up monster on the field. And if you do, standard level reduction. And if you fusion summon a dark monster while this card's in your graveyard, you can banish this card from the graveyard, then target 1 card on the field and blow it up. So that's good, you know? You get to set encounters on stuff, and then you can just banish this when you fusion summon, which you're going to do most of the time, and blow up a card on the opponent's field that's either pesky or something you don't know and you don't want to risk it, like maybe Trap Hole or Bottomless Trap Hole. fucking Vagabond from Duel Links just trap holing me to death. I will forever be salty about that, and I will explain that in detail if people want me to, but oh, I hate the Vagabond for that, and I will never ever be over that. But this is still a good card. Granted, it's a once per turn for each effect, but you know, you still get the field nuke. Or not a field nuke, but a card nuke. And this card, this was mainly here for worst case scenario. You're in the worst case possible. You need the defensive. Here it is. Wall of Thorn. When a plant type monster you control is targeted for an attack, destroy all attack position monsters your opponent controls. This is Predaplant. The only reason you would ever need this is if this is not on the board right now, presumably. These are still in your extra deck or in the graveyard, and one of these are the only things you have, probably this. And what you do is they ram into it, you Wall of Thorns them, and then their whole field dies because who wouldn't switch all their monsters to attack mode when they see this thing staring them down of all cards? Or this. So you just Wall of Thorns it, and you're fine. 3 copies, because if it comes out in the worst case scenario, it's basically your Mirror Force that isn't banned, so go to hell. Also, if you can't tell, this is with no rules. All of our decks are without rules because it's always more fun to play without rules, despite the fact that sometimes we do follow rules, such as we never put Pot of Greed in our decks, just in case we do decide to go to rulings one day. Next up, we've got 3 copies of Predaplant. A continuous trap card. It looks like Jurassic World, honestly, to me, with the Spinosaurus thing in the background. If you have a monster with a Predator counter leaves the field while this card is face up on the field, add 1 Predap card from your deck to your hand. Really? This is the only thing that doesn't restrict you. You could search for another copy of this if you wanted. Cool. You could search for literally anything, including itself, so that's awesome. And you can only use that effect of this card once per turn. And next up, you can banish this card from your graveyard, fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your field or hand as fusion materials. Only Predaplant monsters can be used as fusion materials for fusion summoning using this effect. So you can't unfortunately use this or this into something else, but it's still fine. So technically in this main deck we have 9 polymerizations. I don't think I've ever used this effect in my life. I may have, and I may not just not remember. I know I've abused this card multiple times. I definitely abused this in the video. So, yeah. And finally, on to the extra deck, the thing that you've been waiting for. First up, we got 3 copies of Predaplant, Vert, and Aconda. 500 attack, link 2 in the bottom corners. Not like it matters because you're only going to murder this thing the second it hits the board. Requires 2 effect monsters. Oh, I'm sorry. Are any of these vanillas? I didn't notice that all of these were vanillas, huh? Well, that's a problem. Maybe I should just go find a bunch of effect monsters. You know, yeah, let's just use Dark FM Edition. See, it has an effect. It has the Ultimate Wizard in terms of attack and defense. Yeah, that's an effect, man. These are all just fucking vanillas. Okay, anyways. You can target 1 face-up monster on the field. It becomes a dark until end of turn. Wow. Wait, is that... I don't know how that ability works because me and my friend never use that. No one I've ever met ever used that ability. Jesus. Is that a once per turn and they just didn't bother putting it, or like... I don't know that much about that ability because I mean, presumably it's a once per turn, but I just never knew that ability existed because no one I know ever used it. Even when I just go on random online and then I just fight a bunch of people, no one ever uses that ability because they normally just get rid of it the second it hits the board. Well, okay then. You can pay 2,000 life points and send 1 fusion or polymerization normal spell or quick play spell from your deck to the graveyard. This, literally anything in this side deck. And this effect becomes that spell's effects while that card is activated. Also, you can have special summon monsters for the rest of the turn. So, yeah. You can just easily fusion summon your heart out with this. I don't think you can use that ability right out the gate. I don't think you can. I would like to say you... Oh yeah, it says right here, you can only use each effect of once per turn, so this card is about once per turn for that. I don't think you can fusion summon right after you use the ability, but you might be able to. I don't remember ever using this card. I rarely use it. My friend used to use it a lot, then he just stopped using it for some reason, and then we've just never seen this thing again. So 3 copies because he can still be helpful and he can basically act as a pseudo polymerization, Predaplant fusion. When we shove it in this main deck, greater polymerization, and a spiral fusion, which you'll understand why it's here later. Next up, we've got 2 copies of Predaplant Chimera Elfisol. I swear I probably said that wrong. 2500 attack, 2000 defense, level 7. Oh my god, is this the ace monster of Yuri? Because all anime protagonists must have a monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. Yuri's ace monster doesn't have those stats. It has 2000 defense, but only 2800 attack. That's much more than 2500. Does that mean this is Yuri's real ace? Yeah, I decided to make that joke because I can. Okay, anyways. It requires a Predaplant monster and any dark monster, so you know you can just take your opponent's dark monster and then use any of your Predaplants. Once per turn, you can target one monster on the field with a level less than or equal to this card's, banish it. Okay, I doubt someone's gonna summon like a level 7 or higher unless they're playing Blue Eyes or maybe a bunch of fusion cards to counter this, but otherwise this thing's gonna go off really easily even without the Predator counters. And then, when an attack declared involving this card and opponent's face-up monster, you can activate this effect. Until the end of the turn, that monster loses 1000 attack, and if it does, this card gains 1000 attack. And then once per turn, during the standby phase, after this card was sent to the graveyard, you can add one polymerization spell card or one fusion spell card from your deck to your hand. So let me get this straight. Granted, it's once per turn, but it's something attacks into this. Oh wait, no it's not. It's not once per turn, is it? Well, shit, never mind then. You could just, if someone rammed into this with something else, or you rammed into this against something else, that monster loses, your opponent's monster loses 1000 attack, and this gains 1000. So this hits 3500. So as long as there's attack power is at the very least 4400, this thing's gonna guaranteedly hit over it. Well, that's all what I have, and then you know if they do manage to kill this, you get a free card back. And I really love the banish thing because a lot of cards do have when they leave the field, but most of them have when they're sent to graveyard or when they're destroyed. This banishes, that's neither of those. So, really good card. 2 copies because it can be helpful to stop your opponent from activating effects. Next up, 2 copies of Predaplant and Drago Staplia. I really love this card's look. I like its name despite the fact I'm pretty sure I said it wrong. I just really hate, like, this isn't Yuri's card, and I guess I just don't use it often at all, but it's still a good card in my opinion. 2700 attack, 1900 defense, level 8, 1 fusion monster of any kind and 1 dark monster, and that is the main reason why I don't use him, because he requires a fusion monster to summon out. I don't like doing that. I don't like sacrificing my own fusions. It feels kind of counterintuitive. Like if I really need to for what his ability is, then I'll do it, but I'm not going to do it otherwise. Once per turn, quick effect, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls and place 1 Predator counter on it, and negate the activated effects of your opponent's monster with Predator counters. So your opponent's field basically becomes vanillas as long as each of them have Predator counters on them. So that is good. I just don't like sacking a fusion monster to bring this thing out, but if I have to, because they have like some pesky effect that's going to kill me the next turn, I will. 2700 attack, 1900 defense, level 8. Next up we have, okay, this one has a long effect. I need to bring my mouse over here. Predaplant Triovertarum. This thing is really fucking cool. Why couldn't this have just been Yuri's monster? He can be the Jack Atlas or the Seto Kaiba or the Chaz Princeton to some extent, because Chaz didn't have attack points. Why couldn't this have been Yuri's ace? This is far more cool looking. God, that thing looks beautiful. Hell, this is gonna be the fucking thumbnail. Fuck you, good Stavering Venom. 3k power, 3k defense, level 9. Jeez, that's 3 dragon heads and just like those big wings, that tail, those legs, like I'm not so sure what to call those. They're like, I guess, scales, kind of like baggy pants, I guess. Oh damn, that thing was fucking beautiful. I would love to ride that thing into battle. Requires 3 dark monsters on the field. So, you know, this thing, skill, take your opponent's Predator monsters, fusion summon to this boy. Okay, anyways, gains the attack of all, gains attack equal to the total original attack of all of the monsters on the field with Predator counters on them. And this is why you Predator counter your own monsters. I didn't say it earlier, I kind of hinted to it, but I never said it earlier. This is why you would do it. You can, granted it will weaken your monster's level and maybe make some of their effects useless. Actually it wouldn't, it would make them the same. But now, you can gain power equal to their original attack points, including your opponent's monster, and make this thing bigger. And you can only use each effect of the following of this card's abilities once per turn. When your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck while you control this fusion summon card, quick effect, you can negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster or monsters. So that's really good. It can hit multiple at once. If your opponent were to pendulum summon from the extra deck, you can just nuke all of them. I don't know any other ability that would allow you to summon that many monsters from the extra deck at once, but you can still nuke them if they summon out something big or something that can turn into something big. And if your opponent controls a monster with a Predator counter, you can special summon this card from your graveyard in defense mode. So if your opponent were to murder this thing, you can bring it back, granted in defense mode, but a 3k defensive wall. Yeah, I really like this card. If they somehow manage to kill it in the first place, it's coming back in defense mode, and it gets power for literally anything that has a Predator counter on it. Straight up, 2 copies. The only reason why it's not at 3 is because it requires 3 monsters that are dark to do it. So if your opponent uses something like DNA Transplant, or whatever, the one that changes attribute to light, or something that changes attribute to light, or anything really, it doesn't have to be light, I'm just thinking of light because light's the opposite of dark. This thing kind of becomes useless because you can't use your opponent's monsters, and then your monsters become dark as well. I mean, like, whatever attribute they pick as well. And since it requires 3 dark monsters on the field, since that would affect cards on the board, this thing just wouldn't be able to be summoned in the first place. So 2 because of that reason, but if this thing gets out, whoo, it's very hard time for your opponent to win. And now into our final fusion monsters, the cards the deck is based around. 3 copies of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon! 2800 attack, 2000 defense, level 8. 2 dark monsters on the field except for tokens, so once more you can take your opponent's monsters. If this card is fusion summoned, you can make this card's gain attack equal to one of your opponent's special summon monsters until end of turn. So that's good, you can just make this card stronger for the turn. And once per turn, you can target 1 level 5 or higher monster your opponent controls. Until end phase, this card's name becomes that monster's original name, and replace this effect with that monster's original effect. And if this fusion summon card is destroyed, you can destroy all monsters your opponent special summon monsters. Okay, let's reiterate that. So you can take one of your opponent's special summon monsters' attack points, and most of the time you're probably going to take the monster's attack points from the extra deck, so that means this card's going to be pretty powerful. And you can take opponent's monster's ability that's level 5 or higher and replace it with its own, so as long as you're not playing against these monsters, this card can easily take that ability. And finally, if they manage to murder this, if they destroy it, the only way for this not to go off is if they banish it or return it. You nuke the board of all special summon monsters on your opponent's side. Really good card. 3 copies. And our final fusion monster, and our final card, I guess, in like the entire regular deck, not counting side. Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon. 3300 attack, 2500 defense, level 10. 1 Predaplant monster, and plus 1 dark monster whose original level is level 8 or higher. By the way, I forgot to mention these guys typing. Dragon, plant, plant, plant. So, and then this is also a plant. Why are these two? Yeah, why is this one a plant though? This thing literally has Drago in its card name, but okay. Anyways, 1 Predaplant monster and 1 dark monster whose original level is 8 or higher. So, either you take your opponent's monster for this, or you basically sacrifice one of your fusions. Which, once more, normally I would not be willing to do, but considering what this card does, this is one of the cards I would actually be willing to sacrifice it for. This one, not so much. This one, yeah, I would do it. So anyways, must be fusion summoned. Once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster on the field until end of turn. Change that target's attack points to 0. Also has its effects negated. So your attack points become 0, and you can't do shit to stop me. Well, that's great. And then if this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, destroy as many monsters on the field as possible. Then banish 1 level 8 or higher dark monster from your graveyard and special summon this card from the field to the grave. Maybe special summon this card from the graveyard. So let me get this straight. You can make 1 monster attack point 0 and negate their effects. Then, if they dare try to do something in response, such as murder this thing, it can be sent to the graveyard by any means. Battle, card effect. I guess technically discarding it from the extra deck, because that's just the way it's set. Actually, no, that one counts as destroying. My point stands. It would nuke the board of monsters, and then you can bring this boy right back. Yeah, this thing's very annoying to deal with. 3 copies, it's hard to get rid of. Like, once this thing gets out, you gotta get rid of their graveyard before this thing comes out. It's like fighting against Destiny and Dragoon, where it's kind of immortal. Except Dragoon's a lot harder to deal with, because Dragoon has, like, infinite monsters it can rely on, while this has to be level 8 or higher, but it's still helpful. And now onto the sideboard, where We don't really use the sideboard much because normally we do like just one match of each game, or when we do more than one match of each game, we normally go one match of that, then we'll just go rematch, which doesn't actually allow us to access our sideboards. We have to set it up in advance, best out of 3. But on to what the actual sideboard is in the case that we do use it. 3 copies of Greater Polymerization. Fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using 3 or more monsters from your hand or field as fusion material, and if you do, it gains these effects. It cannot be destroyed by card effects, and it can do piercing damage to an opponent's defense position monster. So this is pretty much made for cards like this where it requires 3 monsters, but it makes it a lot harder to kill because you can no longer kill it by effects, and it can do piercing damage. So being a 30k beat stick at the very least with piercing damage is really helpful. Or 3k beat stick, not 30k, I'm sorry. Anyways, on to other fusion cards. We got Fusion Recovery. You can target 1 polymerization in your graveyard and a fusion monster in your graveyard that was used for a fusion material and add them to your hand. Not a fusion monster, but a monster who uses fusion material. Add them to your hand. So yeah, you got to use actual polymerization in a fusion material monster, but it's still helpful because it can get you your cards back. And 3 copies of that as well. 3 copies of Spiral Fusion is just fusion summon 1 dragon fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion materials. And it doesn't, the other effect doesn't matter, but if you want to know what it does, if you special summon a Gaia the Dragon Champion by this effect, it gains 2600 attack and it can make up to 2 attacks on monsters that you're using each battle phase. So this is mainly here just because it's another polymerization card that's more restrictive towards like dragon type fusions, but at the same time, if for some reason you see Spiral Fusion come down on your opponent, what are the chances that you think they're going to summon Gaia the Dragon Champion? I just want to ask you, like, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're going to bring out something like this, or do you think they're actually going to bring out Gaia the Dragon Champion, which would leave you squandering, going like, oh shit, 5600 attack point monster with triple attack, I gotta set up this plan. They proceed to summon this thing, you're too busy squandering to notice what they summoned, they ram into you with it, and they're like, oh no, my life points, oh god, I'm gonna lose this duel. They realize that you didn't summon that, and then they're like, well shit, my plan went to nothing. I mean, granted that's not going to happen, but my point still stands because honestly it makes people squander for a few seconds about what they think is going to happen. So 3 copies. And I like playing mind games, so this is always something for me. Mist Polymerization at 3. Activate only when a fusion monster is special summoned. Return all face-up fusion monsters to their respective extra decks. Okay, this is here as a just-in-case card. If your opponent's also playing fusions and like they have some bull crap thing going on. I don't know what they could be using at this point, but they have the field advantage. You can get a fusion summon out, and you just need to nuke the board. Call out a fusion monster, Mist Polymerization it. Everything goes back to the extra deck, and they can't do shit. 3 copies. And finally, we've got 3 copies of Fusion Guard. Activate only when an effect that inflicts damage is activated. Negate its activation and effect, and randomly send a fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. So you know, this helps set up for later when you need to revive Greedy Venom a lot, unless it actually sends a Greedy Venom to grave, which could suck. But it basically prevents effect damage against you if that would kill you, and it's setting up for later. So 3 copies. And that was the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. That one was a lot longer than any of our other deck profiles, but that's probably because we had a sideboard this time, and it took me a long time to like get back into the groove, but we're back in the groove. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment any of the decks you guys want to see or any fights you want to see, and we'll try to make them happen. And blaze up that subscribe button, and we'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to keep your soul